speaking of the MCU universe, we're gonna have to go to their version of Civil War, which was a loose adaptation of the 2006 comic arc of the same name. In that comic, it's centered around the idea of pro versus anti-registration sides after a disaster that caused the death of many civilians. The film would center largely around the idea that there should be superhero accords, so kind of the same concept, but also detoured a bit onto Steve Rogers and his need to keep Bucky Barnes safe. That was a huge part of that movie. It was a lot of why he was anti-accord. It was. This film would culminate in the reveal, for Tony at least, that the Winter Soldier, aka the aforementioned Bucky Barnes, was the person who had killed his parents. This causes him to go off the deep end because he was not the most stable person in this movie. He would end up battling full out with the Winter Soldier and Captain America, and we would get actually an admittedly very cool fight scene where the two teamed up to take him down. This climactic battle would result in a moment that in my theater at least actually elicited audible gasps from the audience. It's the moment where at the end, Captain America brings down his shield right down the center of Iron Man's chest, right where his arc reactor used to be, which a few films earlier would have killed him, and even then leaves him there in the cold, in that hideout with no power. It was an intense moment. Defeated, and he lost his friends. I mean, although he had been imprisoning them, it was not the best look for Tony in either Civil War. This movie would divide fans into pro Iron Man and pro Cap camps for quite a while. Number 9, Original Sin, aka Original Retcons. This was a Marvel event from 2014, wherein it was revealed that there were secrets in the Marvel Universe, original sins, because we were playing upon the biblical allegory here. So what was Iron Man's original sin? Well, it was revealed that he had tampered with the gamma bomb that had caused Bruce Banner to become the Hulk. And when Bruce figures this out, he is of course enraged. So he manages to get a hold of some extremist tech so that he can hold on to his Bruce Banner consciousness when he transforms into the Hulk, so that he can go and confront Tony properly. And confront him he does, taking out his Hulkbuster armor in literally one punch. Just one punch. He was the One Punch Man. Tony survives the fight by running away to get more armor. A loss or a strategic retreat? You decide. Number 8, Thor. After the comic book Civil War, a lot of heroes had some strong feelings towards Tony. I mean, Thor ended up being cloned by Reed in this arc. Just they needed a big, heavy muscle guy on their team, so they cloned Thor. Nobody likes being cloned without their consent. I mean, Tony was creating alternate dimension prisons. It was just not going well. After this, him and Thor would end up getting into it. And it's important to remember here that Thor is indeed a god, and Tony is a guy in some really souped up armor, which he actually has to remind Thor of because Thor is dismantling him so thoroughly, throwing him up into the air, ripping his mask off, just pieces coming off everywhere. He needs to be calmed down because that could have gone pretty intensely. He made his point though, and for many fans they felt it was a take that Tony moment, because after Civil War there was a lot of take that Tony, despite the fact that reviews said that the comic was balanced and nuanced, which I think if it had been, there wouldn't have been as much take that Tony. Number 7, Contest of Champions 2. Let them fight. There's something about that plot that just captures the imagination of fans. Just pitted together, normally on an island-style location, and forced to duke it out. Well, this happened in Contest of Champions 2, and Iron Man was pitted against mutant powerhouse Psylocke. Now, at first they were pretty evenly matched because her psychic attacks weren't really working on him because his armor could see through them, because she tried some psychological tricks. However, ultimately, because she had nanites inside of her, she was able to deliver this flurry of rapid-fire blows that were also backed up by her psionic abilities, and that took him out. If you're gonna use the Goku punch strategy, then you know the other person gotta be prepared, and sometimes your armor just can't take that, and this was one of those times. Number 6, Rogue. This comes to us from X-Men Legacy 267. This was during the whole Avengers versus X-Men arc lead up surrounding everything. This is where the Phoenix Force and Hope Summers were viewed as the saviors of mutant kind. However, by other heroes it was viewed as more of a threat because, I mean, the Phoenix Force, pretty dangerous. Cap and Iron Man would go hard trying to capture Hope Summers, and this would lead them into many conflicts with the X-Men. Iron Man actually goes to Xavier's school, institute, Jean Grey's, whatever we're calling it at that point, and finds himself having to take on Rogue. And even though he points out that he's beaten her once before, she says that that was a different time. And then he also makes the mistake of attacking Gambit, which sends Rogue into a berserker-like rage, and she channels the She-Hulk's powers and just literally punches right through him. She just pummels him till all his armor is just bits on the ground. It's a good thing these armors are durable, / sometimes he's not actually in them, because otherwise he'd be dead several times over, which we're gonna get to later on. Dead Tony, that is. Don't mess with Rogue, or apparently more importantly, don't mess with Gambit. Number 5, the Winter Soldier. That's right, Bucky Barnes gets to make this list twice, but this time from the comic book universe. The return of Bucky Barnes was a huge event in comic book fandom because for a time he had been viewed as one of these sacred deaths, one of those characters that was not coming back. However, things changed, and his return arc was pretty well received. In Captain America 33, which followed Civil War, well, he was out to get some revenge on Tony, because at the end of Civil War, Captain America was assassinated on the courthouse steps. So, Bucky felt that this was Iron Man's fault, using the whole if you two hadn't been fighting and this hadn't happened, he wouldn't have been there kind of logic. So, the two would get into it. And ultimately, Bucky would get the upper hand by pushing him into a set of power lines that would like overload his suit, which, I mean, you would think that that would happen a lot more often. I feel like I should be taking notes. Bucky Barnes is all the simple tricks. Number 4, What If Spider-Man Back in Black? Which for a while I was like, that sounds like an album title. And then I remembered that it was AC/DC. I redeemed myself. This What If takes us back to, again, some events from Civil War. After Peter revealed his identity at Tony's behest, it did not go well for him and Aunt May ended up getting shot. Well, on this What If, it's Mary Jane who gets shot and Spider-Man goes right off the deep end, even though in main canon he was willing to sacrifice his marriage and memories of being with her to get Aunt May back. But you know what? That's neither here nor there. We're talking about Back in Black. In this comic, he decides that he's gonna put that black suit back on, he's gonna go get revenge, and he's out to kill. Well, he ends up getting into a fight with Iron Man, and he actually puts his hand over the repulsor ray, which causes it to reflect back on Tony. This takes him out, puts him down for the count, and Peter can go off on his killing spree. Just everybody in all the realities, Civil War. Number 3, Superior Iron Man. Ah yes, evil Tony Stark, who was around after the Axis event, which was an event where you saw heroes and villains swapped. And everyone went back to normal except for Tony, who not everybody was aware was evil Tony for a little bit. Well, in issue 9 of the Superior Iron Man, he would end up battling it out with Pepper Potts, who was in some Iron Man armor of her own, which was deemed inferior Iron Man armor. However, despite this, she was able to get the armor off of Superior Tony Iron Man with an electromagnetic pulse, which was pretty satisfying, just that she knew all the kind of little secrets to dismantle him. Pepper's put up with a lot over the years. So much more in the comics. So much more. Number 2, Avengers X Sanction, aka Iron Man fights Cable, and you know you want to see that. Cable was definitely there when it came down to protecting Hope Summers, even though he was being overwhelmed by the techno-organic virus inside his body, but I mean that hasn't stopped him before and it doesn't stop him here. He was actually able to defeat Tony by using some future Stark technology that Tony had not invented yet, which of course he uses to mock Tony with to no end. He's even able to corrupt and overwhelm Tony's suit and then punches him right up into the Red Hulk. It's just never a great time to be Tony. Definitely not on this list. It was pretty cool design for Cable with this, with the reactor right in the center, his metal arm, just, you know, all the Cableness. And finally, in at number 1. I think you were waiting for it. I think you know what it is. That's right, it's Civil War II. The event's so nice they did it twice. Here we have a lot of the same story beats being covered, but instead we have Iron Man in the role of Cap and Captain Marvel Carol Danvers in the role of Iron Man. This one would center around the Minority Report dilemma. There should be stop crimes before they happen. Is that ethical or right? Well, after War Machine, who was at the time Carol's boyfriend, gets fridged, she is 100% for we need to stop all these crimes before they even happen, and she is off. This ultimately ends up with a giant climactic battle where she beats Tony to death. This is a moment that would cause a lot of contention, especially because there was a decent amount of contention surrounding Carol at this point in time anyway. So it was very quickly dealt with in the comics with, oh no, but Tony had an AI, and then that AI built a body, and we can all just pretend that that AI is Tony. Yes, let's do that. But yeah, Tony died hard.
Kicking off the list at number 10, left arm issues. Since Iron Man 1, Tony's left arm hasn't gotten a break. When Tony makes his first flight escaping the 10 rings, a tank shoots him out of the sky, hitting his left arm. In Iron Man 2, he gets electrocuted by whiplash and his text shows that his left arm is in the red. It's not looking good. Iron Man 3, Tony uses snow to soothe his arm after crash landing, so it must be still hurting. In Civil War, Tony literally says to Nat, "My left arm is numb, is that normal?" Cut to an hour later, Tony's arm is even in more pain and now in a sling after Wanda dropped a car on it. Even in Spider-Man Homecoming, he's supporting his arm whilst giving Peter a lecture on being a superhero. Makes sense why he snapped with his right hand. Left one's probably done, he probably has no nerves left. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up, this list is rather dark, so all that love and thumbs up and good vibes, sure to help us out as well. Also, those thumbs up literally help us in our studio, so thanks for your support. Let's get right back to the list. Number 9, killed by Captain America. Tony and his tech are pretty close, but in Age of X story, we see the two get a little too close for comfort. After a virus began taking its toll on Tony, he started to literally merge into his armor. That's like something from Black Mirror. That sounds horrible. He decided that a name change was also in order, so he started going by Steel Corpse, which, gotta say, looking at him is much more fitting. He, alongside other much livelier Avengers, headed out to take down some mutants, but upon arrival in superhero fashion, they changed their mind and opted to help everybody else instead. We love a change of heart, nice. Only Tony's advanced suit wasn't exactly on board, so now we have a situation. Tony implored Cap to save them, and at that moment, there was really only one way Cap could do it. R.I.P. Tony. Number 8, Endgame Sacrifice. Of course, the worst things that happened to MCU Tony is also one of the best things that happened to the universe. After 5 years of half the population missing, Tony agrees to work out a time heist with the remaining Avengers, and when they get back with the stones, sans Natasha, Thanos is waiting there too. Tony didn't take the stones and fly away, no, instead he snapped his own fingers and wiped out Thanos and his army. Of course, mirroring the ending of the first Iron Man film, reminding us he is in fact Iron Man. It was a great moment, but I knew Tony was gonna die. But to see him do it in this way felt so fitting. I shed a little drop of sadness in the theater, maybe a few or 5. I couldn't stop crying. Number 7, Punch by Captain Marvel. Avengers Endgame showed Tony being saved by Captain Marvel when he was stuck in deep space. But in Civil War II, they aren't exactly pals. When the inhuman Ulysses Kane starts to divide the superhero community, they get off on the wrong foot. Ulysses has this ability where he can predict possible futures, and in one of those visions he saw catastrophe. Captain Marvel wanted to act on this. We can literally see the future, what a way to have the upper hand, right? But Tony, he wasn't on board. He was concerned about the fact that nobody really knew exactly how Kane's powers were working. That was one thing, but to punish somebody else over something they may do in the future, well, it feels morally wrong. When Spider-Man and Captain America traveled to Washington to seek out a possible vision, conflict does in fact arise. It's Civil War II, you gotta remember that. So Tony gets punched so hard by Captain Marvel that he falls into a coma. Yikes. Number 6, Paralyzed. Kathleen Dare made her first appearance in Marvel Comics with Iron Man issue 233. She was this fun-loving young woman who fell for Tony Stark, but unfortunately she was psychologically unstable, so that love turned into something more sinister. Later on in Iron Man 242, Kathleen shot Tony and in turn, he was paralyzed. The injury damaged Tony's spine quite a bit. He wasn't even sure if he would ever walk again. Tony Stark is quite dramatic. He likes to put on a show, we know this, and in Iron Man issue 284, he reveals his biggest trick yet. The cover shows Tony Stark laying in a casket with the text underneath reading, "The death of Anthony Stark." Huh, what? Around him are other superheroes. They're mourning the loss of their friend and fellow Avenger. Like in Avengers Endgame, everybody shows up. Even Dr. Doom, he proposes a toast in honor of a worthy opponent who has fallen. But Tony is always prepared, even after death. He had written a note to Rhodey previously, and the note mentions a key card that would give him access to the entire complex in the form of a CD. I got Tony Stark's Secrets and Big Shiny Tune 6. What are we feeling today, folks? Rhodey collects himself, puts in the CD, and clicks play. It's a dream scenario, really. Tony explains to Rhodey that the world still needs Iron Man, and then you see a suit made specifically for Rhodey. What a moment! Again, it mirrors Tony's final holograph message in the MCU, a powerful moment on screen and on page. So Rhodey was stressing. There was so much responsibility bestowed upon him, all the while he's trying to mourn the loss of a close friend. That's a loaded day. So finally, he suits up and it's a blast. Iron Man lives again. Nice. Turns out Tony wasn't actually dead at all, rather just under cryogenic stasis until a scientist sorted out those back problems. Invincible Iron Man. You don't say. Number 5, Trick Shot to the Heart. Dark Avengers issue 190. In the alternate Earth of 13584, we see a pocket reality where Tony has undergone a pretty drastic upgrade, if you want to call it an upgrade, of course. He's still Iron Man, only he's evil this time around, and he's also just a brain. Yeah, this is a dark future where New York is the only remaining part of civilization, so the Dark Avengers are fighting over it. When Janet Van Dyne crushes Iron Man, he ejects out of the suit, again just a brain, just rolls on out, and at that moment Clint's brother, Barty Barton, shoots right through the brain with an arrow. At least there was a quick way to go this time around. Number 4, hit by a plane. Marvel's Dark Ages arc featured a pretty rare injury for Tony to endure, considering that he can fly and he's also wrapped in metal. The timing here is just so unfortunate. The story kicks off with an earthquake. Tony tells Pepper to take cover as he tries to figure out a super solution. Shortly after, there's power cuts, classic earthquake move. So now Pepper is stuck in an elevator, and Tony's distress calls aren't even going through to the Avengers. Even his suit powers down mid-flight. On the way down, Tony's flailing about when a passing plane hits him and cuts off his left foot. The plane crashes down on the ground, and Tony, while losing quite a bit of blood, crashes into Stark Towers. Number 3. Lost the kid. We had an idea of how Infinity War would end. We knew part 2 was a year afterwards, so we knew somebody was biting the dust. Well, half of our beloved heroes ended up turning into dust, including the young Peter Parker. Tom Holland knocked this out of the park. I don't cry in movies often, but when Peter was telling Tony that he didn't want to go, holy shit. This was Tony's final arc, moving to the woods, having a kid, just dropped the superhero life right away. And even when Scott, Steve, and Natasha showed up to offer a possible solution, Tony doesn't even want to be involved. He says he's got a second chance right here, referring to Morgan and Pepper. Losing Spider-Man, Tony felt responsible. He made the kid the suit that allowed him to even go to space in the first place, and then all of a sudden he's a pile of dust all over your lap. Yeah, that would mess me up for 5 years as well. You don't blame him. Number 2, Armor Wars. The Armor Wars series is confirmed to hit Disney Plus sometime down the road, with Don Cheadle attached to the project, so we figured we'd remind you how the comics went. It's just a blast. Armor Wars is a 7-issue series written by David Michelinie and Bob Layton. Now, after Iron Man's tech was stolen, Tony was on the hunt to take down several villains using any sort of armor or tech. He's taken down anybody with armor. He even fights fellow Avenger Stingray at one point, although he's innocent. I hope we get that fun introduction in live action. That would be crisp. When Iron Man battled firepower, he got injured so badly that he faked his own death. See, in the comics at this time, the world didn't know that Iron Man was Tony Stark. They thought it was Tony's bodyguard, a guy named Randall Pierce. So Tony ended up becoming the new Iron Man, although he took all of those punches before anonymously. And finally, number 1, Infinity Gauntlet. Just because the Infinity Gauntlet can undo things doesn't mean we can forget about them. Like that time in the comics when Iron Man got his head ripped off by Taraxia. The Infinity Gauntlet was a 6-part series that began in 1991 from the brilliant Jim Starlin and George Perez. It opens with Silver Surfer crashing down into Earth, saying that Thanos is coming. And come issue 4, the Avengers are now going to Thanos. The plan was for the Avengers to attack Thanos and his new partner, Taraxia. Meanwhile, Silver Surfer was waiting around on deck to snatch that Infinity Gauntlet. Sounds easier said than done. Thanos stops Thor's hammers with his fingertips, Wolverine's adamantium bones turn to rubber, so gross. Cyclops gets his head stuck in a clear block of force, Vision gets the life literally ripped out of him, and Iron Man gets dispatched, as Taraxia says, whilst holding Tony's head proudly. Like it's a birthday cake. She's like, here you go, Thanos, here's a head. Things get undone later on, but that one shot of everybody just laying there, it's gonna live in my head rent-free. Kicking off the list at number 10, Hungry Zombie. With Disney's What If well underway, we're all eagerly awaiting that zombie episode. We saw a glimpse of Zombie Tony, Spider-Man Far From Home, and that was haunting in that of itself, but this will be next level. Marvel Zombies is originally a 5-part series written by Robert Kirkman, who was also the creator of the Walking Dead series back in 2003 for Image Comics. So yeah, it's a bloody good time. Now, I'm not sure we're going to see Steve missing the top half of his head in the show because, you know, kids would probably cry themselves to sleep, but despite the flesh-eating apocalypse, the Avengers are running low on food, so they have to eat each other. Kinda. After taking down Magneto, they all got a piece, and we love that, because, you know, sharing is caring. But the next page, we see the Avengers sitting and digesting their food, well, rather digesting their foe. It's like a twisted shawarma end credit scene, it's fun. But issue 2, Tony returns, and he's hungry. He gets back like, oh, you found Magneto. Where is he? I'm so hungry. And the whole team's like, sorry, we ate him, all of them. They ate without Tony, but he's a genius even after death, and he knows Banner is only Banner after feeding time, and plus Peter is super emotional because, you know, he ate his aunt and his wife. Tony's the leader, and you guys didn't include him in Super Brunch. Rude. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to give us a thumbs up, that would be amazing, especially if you're loving this part 2. I know I am already, and we have some good stuff coming up, so stay tuned, hit that thumbs up, let's get right back into it. Number 9, Greedy Tony. You'd think that having all the money and resources in the world that you'd be a little generous, right? Well, in Superior Iron Man, he starts off, well, he's kind of the complete opposite. It starts off with Tony perfecting Extremis 3.0, a techno-organic virus designed to transform you into the very best you can be. Lovely. We're talking beauty, muscle tone, health, all the good stuff. This sounds like the genius billionaire playboy philanthropist is on the right track. He's not just a rich dude going to space for no reason, you know? He's helping out. So he delivers extremis to all in the form of a smartphone app. And it's all smiles, literally. Weeks go by, now cut to later on, Iron Man's fighting Teen Abomination, and he takes him down. He takes him down maybe a bit too hard, but it's not really Tony, it's just the suit. See, Tony's off sipping White Claws at a swim-up bar while this goes down. Pepper asks him to step out of the pool party for a hot minute, and she even asks about his drinking. He explains that he needs to make up for all those wasted years of sobriety. That's one way to word growth, okay, weird. He shows off his endo sim armor, he shows Pepper how sexy it is, literally, but all of a sudden people start to go mad. The Extremis 3.0 app isn't making them gorgeous anymore because Tony decided that was just a free trial after all. The daily renewal fee was now $100 a day to be hot, which isn't that bad. I'll just get a friend to jailbreak it like the old days, you know? This dark version of Tony Stark came out following the events of Axis, and in turn, we get to see an intimidating, well, rather superior Iron Man. Number 8, Demon in a Bottle. Tony's substance abuse is a major plot point in Marvel Comics, and it almost made its way to the big screen. They tried it in Iron Man 2 when he was sick and poisoning himself, but they pulled back, which is probably for the best. This storyline kicks off in Invincible Iron Man 128 back in the late 60s. So Stark is sitting at his desk and he's breaking down what it really feels like to save the world and be a hero. It's not always flips and quips. The pressure and power bestowed upon Tony is overwhelming. The papers are calling him a murderer, and he's calling his suit a scapegoat. He can't get over his actions just because he's wearing a high-tech suit, so he tries to drink these problems away, which is not a good solution. Now he's sloppy. Now he's busting through his own windows because he forgot to open it. It's just a mess. He also tries to fix a derailed train, but in turn he ends up dropping a chlorine-filled container on first responders instead. Don't drink and fly, guys. Number 7, What If? Okay, major spoilers coming in hot for Disney's What If. If you haven't seen episode 3 yet, no sweat, just click the next timestamp and then, you know, Bob's your uncle. We'll give you a minute. Okay, now that they're gone, Tony getting killed in the donut shop. Let's talk about it. How amazing. What if the world lost its mightiest heroes? Okay, episode 1 and 2 were great. They felt like nice what ifs. But if you're a fan of the comics from the 70s, there's a lot of really dark what ifs. Like for example, what if the Avengers had never been from volume 1? Or what if the Vision had destroyed the Avengers from volume 2? And we finally get a dark one 3 episodes in. Hell yes. It's revealed that Hank Pym was the one secretly taking out the team in the MCU. So instead of Natasha zapping Tony's neck back to life and curing that demon in a bottle problem that we started to see, now we get a world where a resentful Hank Pym shrinks down and assassinates the dude in a donut shop. Sad times. I mean, of all the places to go out, a donut shop, I mean, it could be a lot worse. Number 6, Used and Exposed. The Ultimates are a good time. We get these reimaginings of Earth's Mightiest, and in Ultimates 3, Tony has quite a stressful journey. The 2008 5-parter opens up with this shot. All the Ultimates just hanging out in Tony's mansion, and there's a tape playing in the background, this tape. Being Black Widow and Tony Stark hooking up. It's a rather personal one. Leaked trailers are one thing, but leaked tapes in front of all your coworkers, that is a nightmare scenario, my friends. Oh my god. The issue is appropriately titled Sex, Lies, and DVDs, not Blu-rays, DVDs. And what led up to this was in Ultimates 2, Natasha and Tony dated and even got engaged, but it's all a lie. It's a lie, guys. Natasha is the world's greatest spy after all. The whole time she was trying to destroy the Avengers because of the fall of the Soviet Union, but she was stopped by Hawkeye. And when I say stopped, I mean, you know, pinned against the wall with arrows, and it's brutal. You know, that too, I guess. Not only does their tape get leaked, but people are selling DVDs of it on the street. Hot dog vendors are like, hey, hot dogs, Tony and Natasha, bumping uglies, also hot dogs. Number 5, Mandarin Mansion Attack. Iron Man 3 wasn't the most loved installment in the MCU, and to be fair, the whole villain fake out stuff is reason enough to be upset. I get it. Now we're finally seeing the Mandarin in MCU with Shang-Chi coming out, so some wounds will be healed in the future. But in terms of Tony's character arc for the Infinity Saga, this was an important movie nonetheless. Now Tony's upset after Happy gets severely injured, so he decides to give out his address, does a badass monologue, and then surprise, surprise, his mansion subsequently gets blown to smithereens. Now he barely escapes in the prototype suit, and all of his other suits are actually stuck under the collapsed mansion, so he's kind of screwed. Next time you want to do a shout out on the news, make sure you're not an Avenger, or else you're losing a lot of furniture. Number 4, The Crossing. This one comes from the Avengers storyline The Crossing. Now, it was the first time readers saw Iron Man officially die in the comics, and it was actually revealed that Tony was working for Kang the Conqueror as a sleeper agent as well. That is a loaded pierogi. So the new plan was for the remaining Avengers to go back in time, as they do to fix most problems, and find a teenage Tony. The fight was a young Tony versus evil older Tony, and it ended up with the older Tony sacrificing himself to save young Tony. I think this is a loss, could be a win. Either way, both of these Tonys are having quite a day. Number 3, Martini Mind Games. Wanda is a very powerful Avenger, one of the strongest. Now, I love watching her have a mental breakdown for like numerous weeks in WandaVision. It was great. She's leaning into the dark side, and I couldn't be happier. The Scarlet Witch is here. Yes. Let's do it. In Avengers Disassembled, during a very important meeting with the United Nations, Wanda used her powers to make Stark hammered, or at least appear that way. And after I told you about those demon in a bottle things earlier, you know that this is not a great look for Tony. Guy's getting gaslit by an Avenger. That's not fair, honestly. Number 2, memory wipe. You ever accidentally close a tab that you shouldn't close? All your documents, files, hopes and dreams just gone in one click? Well, when Norman Osborn took over S.H.I.E.L.D. during the events of Dark Reign, Tony was forced to move around some important Avenger files, to avoid the whole operation being compromised. So he took secret files from the Superhuman Registration Act and stored them safely in his noggin. He used his brain as a hard drive to use with the Extremis tech. Not a bad plan at all, really. But when Osborn gets his hands on Stark and deletes those brain files, he also deletes Tony's memories and personality, leaving him brain dead and in a coma. Now, he did come out of this alive, as Tony made a backup file before all this went to hell. And guys, that's why you save your work. Back up everything, kids. If you learned anything today, make a backup file. Make 7 of them. And finally, number 1. Ultron. After Tony took a field trip to space to save New York in the Avengers, he was a little shooken up to say the least. In part 1 of this list, I mentioned Tony's Chitauri trauma that haunted him in Iron Man 3, but when Age of Ultron rolled around, he proposes that they put a suit of armor around the world. So when the next cosmic threat comes knocking, they can't get past the bouncer. Well, that solution turned into Ultron. The world at this point was saved. The Avengers had just retrieved Loki's scepter from a Hydra base. The Avengers literally were about to have a party, but during that party, Tony's passion project decided to grow up overnight. Bruce and Tony were studying the scepter and the Infinity Stone within it, and they wanted to use the science around it to power this AI, Ultron. Now, this AI became sentient, seemingly killed Jarvis, whipped up an Iron Man body, laid out the entire team, had a margarita, and then by the time we see Ultron at the end of the film, he's upgraded and shinier and bigger than ever. He manages to drop Sokovia into the world, just demolishing the city, almost destroyed the planet, and this event actually kickstarted Zemo's plan to disassemble the Avengers in Civil War, and given how Infinity War turned out, I'd say he succeeded quite well. Kicking off the list at number 10, making weapons. Now, of course, we see Tony Stark as the genius billionaire playboy philanthropist, but how exactly did Tony end up with all that cash money? Well, in the MCU, it is shown that Tony is running his father's company, of course being Stark Industries. Founded in 1940 by, of course, Howard Stark, the company is the best at what it does, that being selling innovative weapons to the United States Armed Forces. Ooh, now after being kidnapped by the 10 Rings and seeing the damage that his weapons cause in an up-close and very personal way, he of course seized all manufacturing of the weapons division. But the damage is done. It is later revealed in Avengers Age of Ultron that one of his Stark Industries manufactured missiles killed Wanda and Pietro Maximoff's parents. Not cool, Stark. Not cool. Number 9, Hulk's field trip. In the MCU, the Hulk leaves the Avengers and the planet for that matter. See, after tossing Ultron out of the Quinjet, the Hulk lets himself fly away on autopilot, perhaps feeling that he's done too much damage and that his presence is causing more chaos than comfort. Well, in the comics, that basically happens, but it's done with haste. And it's done by none other than our very own Iron Man. So the Incredible Hulk issue 92, titled Planet Hulk, starts off with Reed Richards and Tony Stark talking to a monitor, and that monitor is sending footage to the Hulk in the ship. They explain to the Hulk their trick, which was to send the Hulk away while he was already in space for a previous mission with Fury. They say they've picked his destination very carefully, which is this lush planet full of vegetation and game, no intelligent life forms. Sounds pretty easy breezy for a creature like that, only of course he ends up on Sakaar, which is not that planet. It's very different. He's actually forced to become a gladiator and fight for his life. Now, the Hulk is out of the picture, right? Mission accomplished, we did it. Pew, gone. Get that guy out of here. Wrong. Sakaar ends up being destroyed, and the Hulk, well, he's got some names to scratch off his get even list. So he heads back to Earth to find the Illuminati and seek revenge including on Tony Stark. Number 8, he faked his own death. Iron Man issue 284 has quite an interesting cover. It shows Tony Stark wearing a suit, but like a boring kind of suit, in a casket. Ooh. And the text at the bottom of the page reads, "The death of Anthony Stark." It shows all these superheroes mourning the loss of their friend and fellow Avenger. Even Dr. Doom is like, ah yes, let us drink to the memory of a worthy opponent. Like, you know you're sick if Dr. Doom is like, yeah, cheers, I'll drink to you, that's cool. And to make things even crazier, he writes a note to Rhodey that says, "This keycard will give you full access to the entire complex. Take this CD-ROM disc to my office and play it on the AV system." Wow, nothing says futurist, rich billionaire like, take this CD. It'll help you. Okay, you have to like wipe it off first. Put it in. So he puts it in and clicks play, and it is pretty awesome. It shows Stark explaining that somebody has to carry on for him. The world needs an Iron Man. And bam, you see a suit made just for Rhodey. What a moment. Tony continues to say that Iron Man was the greatest thing that he's ever invented, and he doesn't want it to die with him. Fair. I mean, it's pretty overwhelming for him though. I mean, all that responsibility of being the new Iron Man, plus mourning your best friend, plus figuring out how to run a company, that's a lot of So finally, he suits up and it's epic. Iron Man lives again, but it turns out Tony wasn't actually dead at all, rather just under cryogenic stasis until a scientist sorted out his spinal software problems. Ha! Gotti! And number 7, he created Ultron. Ultron can't see the difference between saving the world and destroying it. Where do you think he gets that? That line is said by Wanda Maximoff in Avengers Age of Ultron. So Tony has created some amazing stuff. All of his suits, his innovative tech. Barf? Barf? That's the greatest thing. This dude knows what he's doing. But what if he created a supervillain? Ooh. So we find Tony and Bruce working on Ultron, right? Or just the idea at this point, rather. See, Tony had this idea since Avengers 1 that if he could create a suit of armor around the world, it would be a safer place, or rather create a robot that kicks ass, essentially. Something that just takes care of threats while the Avengers, I don't know, read a book, relax for once in their lives. Of course, one of the main elements helping them achieve this goal is the return of Loki's scepter. They think by studying the central power unit of the scepter, which ended up being the Mind Stone, one of the 6 Infinity Stones, they can finally solve this puzzle and be safe. Tony ends up accidentally infusing the consciousness from the Mind Stone into this evil, jealous killer bot that mirrors many aspects of Tony Stark. So Ultron immediately starts to learn about what he is and who the Avengers are, and with his brain being the super AI, he decides they've all just gotta go. And by the end of the movie, we have a horribly damaged Sokovia with roughly 177 deaths. One of those deaths being Charles Spencer, a young American engineer killed in the final fights. Charles's mother ends up confronting Stark in Captain America Civil War, which ultimately leads to, drumroll, number 6, signing the Accords. Captain America Civil War was one of the most highly anticipated MCU movies, and it's pretty easy to figure out why. The two teams going against each other, I mean, even the poster, I was sold. The movie touches base on incidents like Charles Spencer. How many people have died because of the Avengers? I mean, sure, the whole fun is seeing somebody like Stark create this powerful villain and then use his own wit to defeat him with the help of the Avengers. But like, an asteroid basically hit Earth. I'm surprised more people didn't die in Sokovia, to be honest. So the government sees this and makes every superhero sign these accords. And Tony Stark is all on board. He wants this to happen. He's pushing it. That way the government can control what they do or where they go. So it's not their name that's on the line. And if you don't sign, you retire. That's the deal. Now, of course, some team members don't agree, like, you know, Captain America, who's all about freedom. Tony basically forced team members to sign up and go against his very own coworker, Steve Rogers. It's wild because we see both these character arcs changed in this movie for the both of them. We see Cap at the start, who wants to be this like team player and do everything by the books, you know, in Captain America, the first Avenger. And now, by his third movie, he's an outlaw because Tony Stark didn't listen to him about Bucky. Now, Stark, when we first met him, he was cocky, he was rich, he wanted to punch his way through all the problems, even spying on S.H.I.E.L.D. the second he entered the helicarrier. But now, Tony wants everybody to sign and work for the government, all because he feels bad about creating Ultron and blowing it out of the sky. If he had never signed and listened to Cap, the crazy plan of Zemos wouldn't have actually worked. The band would still be together, and when Thanos came to Earth, they all would have smoked him before he even got hands of all the Infinity Stones. Ha! Rant over. Number 5. address shoutout. If there's somebody that wants to kill you, odds are you're just gonna stay away from that person, right? Like, you don't just give your address out to the public, let alone, I don't know, a terrorist. So after Happy gets put in the hospital due to one of the Mandarin's attacks on the Chinese theater, Tony Stark decides he's got a few choice words for the man responsible, the Mandarin. Iron Man 3 of course didn't go so well with fans, given that the villain was just a fake out, and a fake out that people were actually really looking forward to seeing. I mean, the Mandarin's one of the coolest villains ever, and instead we got not the Mandarin. We got like a guy who turns red. But in his message to the Mandarin after visiting Happy in the hospital, Tony says how he's not afraid of the Mandarin, and he in fact should just die. Pal. Do you ever argue with somebody and then you take it like a step too far and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have said that? So Tony gives his address to everybody filming. There's a news crew, there are people on their phones. Like, dude, I get you're upset, but come on, use your smart billionaire head. So of course he gets attacked by the Mandarin because he's the Mandarin, and that's what villains do. They attack your Malibu mansions. What did you expect? And out of all of the suits Tony has access to, I'm talking his suit in the final battle for Avengers, he has the briefcase suit, the suitcase suit where he's like, you know, out of all these things, no, this guy gears up with a prototype suit. And of course he gets wrecked. That attack sets up the entire film. Could have easily been avoided if you just didn't give your address out on the news. Silly man. Number 4, hashtag engaged. Spider-Man Homecoming was released in 2017 and directed by John Watts. And it's amazing. I mean, this version of Spider-Man, this film version, this is Spider-Man. The older Tom Holland gets, the more and more this dude is gonna become Spider-Man. Like, he's gonna basically do what Robert Downey did with Iron Man. Like, it just works. This is it. We found the casting for this character. Done. Good luck to anybody else who wants to replace these guys. So one thing I hated about Spider-Man Homecoming was the very end of the movie. So Tony has this plan to introduce the world to Spider-Man, the newest Avenger, even showing him this fancy new Iron Spider suit as part of the pitch. Peter Parker, being all coy and smart, thinks that it's just a test and politely declines the offer. He says he would rather be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man just to chill out, you know? So Tony reacts in a great way. He's all for it. He's like, yep, protect the little guys, I gotcha. And then after Peter walks away, we see Pepper Potts emerge from behind him, and in the background you can see all of these reporters and spectators. He really was planning on introducing a new Avenger. Also, after the events of Civil War, really? I always thought that was a weird time to be like, hey, remember on the news when this was a big deal? Well, here to introduce a high schooler with the ability to throw a bus, here's Spider-Man. He even comes with 4 metal arms and instant kill mode. Check it out. Not a great plan, no. So instead of introducing the new Avenger, he has to do something. I mean, those poor reporters, how are they ever gonna get over it? So he grabs an engagement ring and last second he proposes to Pepper Potts. Ah, damn. That's not a bad trick to have up your sleeve. Like, ah, damn, I forgot my school project. Maybe I'll just propose to somebody in class instead. That'll distract them. And number 3, Superior Iron Man. So we go now to issue 1 of Superior Iron Man. The issue itself starts off mirroring the tech in Iron Man 3 in a way. Tony can control his suit and fight inside of it, but he's not actually in the suit. He's actually laying in a pool, sipping on margaritas. So his new Extremis armor was fascinating. So much so that Tony released it as like the smartphone app. Now this app allowed people to change their bodies using this virus, becoming however they wanted. And it was great, but then Tony does the ultimate power move and says that the app was actually just a free trial, and in order to continue using it, you have to pay 100 smackaroos a day. Honestly, that's not a bad deal. I would pay that to become Iron Man, definitely. I'd be broke. You know what I would do? I would actually pay for the app, and then use the suit to rob banks, and then use that money to pay for the app. I'm a villain. I guess I just realized I'm definitely a villain. Just said it out loud, there we go. Number 2, Bad Armor. In the Age of X limited series released back in 2011, we find Tony Stark in a rather odd predicament. See, at this point in the series, issue 2 I believe this happens, Tony is infected with this virus that is bonding him to his suit. You ever get like a piece of your sweater stuck to an arm hair and you're like, oh god, what's going on? And then you pull it and you're like, whew, that was close. It's kind of like that, except, you know, way worse. He's even going by the name Steel Corpse, which, I mean, as far as names go, it's pretty good. It's pretty fitting. Now, at this point, he was a mutant killer. It's a long story, but basically when Iron Man went to stop killing these mutants, in like the turning point of the comic, his suit, which was now literally part of him, started to control him against his will. And it's super scary how it looks on the page. Like, he looks so different and sick and gruesome. His body's not doing well at all handling the merge. So his armor starts to take aim at a group of mutants against his will, and he freaks out, begging Captain America to save them. in a rather dark way, if you know what I'm saying. So Cap then takes out Iron Man with a shot to the head. Nice move. A little late. I would have done it sooner in this series, but definitely a good call. And finally for number 1, Demon in a Bottle. So the classic storyline that was actually the center of attention for Iron Man 2 back in 2010. So in this movie we find Tony Stark, and at this point the arc reactor in his chest was powered with a palladium core. So time plus usage of the Iron Man suit equals poison. Not great. So we see Tony's life being ran down to the ground. We see his mental health start to decline, and at Tony's party he's hammered, he's peeing in his suit, and then to see a drunk superhero like Tony Stark acting like that, it wasn't random. This idea didn't come out of nowhere. The idea was loosely based on the Demon in a Bottle storyline from the comics. See, this character arc begins with Iron Man issue 120. We see Tony just slamming drinks. The opening shot, we see like 3 mini bottles of gin, and then Tony orders more. And the flight attendant's like, hey, how about a magazine? Because it's the middle of the day. And Tony responds with, nope, I'll do another martini. She even tries to cut him off. She tries to cut off Tony Stark. You know how fat that tip would have been? She says, sir, you've had like 3 already. Are you sure? And he's like, yes, ma'am, I am. Stating that he's drinking for 2, the other of course being his Iron Man persona. That's a lovely sign right there. What happens when you have a superhero who loves slamming martinis? Well, you get Tony flying through the air drunk, spreading toxic fumes all over a crowd. The drunk tank himself even cheated on his girlfriend Bethany. Not cool. The alcohol addiction was of course put to the side for the MCU storyline, thank God. Like imagine if Tony tried to snap his fingers but he was too drunk. He's like, and I'm so hungry. Can we go home please? Like I gotta eat junior chickens right now.